Hi, I'm Justin Mormon.
And I'm Katie Thornton, and this is the Re-Education of Schools podcast,
where we have open, honest conversations about how to better understand social-emotional learning, trauma-informed care, the whys behind student behavior, and how to help kids navigate it all as they go through school and life. All right, welcome back to our next episode 50.
Yes.
Kind of a big deal.
It's a big deal.
We didn't know if we'd make it to 5. So Here we are at 50, and that's pretty exciting. I'm really actually super excited for this episode. I'm not going to do our normal lead-in, as always, but we're really excited. We have a special guest.
Yeah, and I will say this is a guest I've been kind of reserving and waiting to ask because I wanted to make sure the podcast was going to be.
She's not just saying that. That's real.
I've been telling you. I said Dr. Lori's going to be the very, very special podcast when we maybe hit episode 50, and here we are because it's such an honor.
So Dr. Lori Desautels here with us. We're excited to be able to have a conversation about a lot of different things are going to come up here in a second. Dr. Lori, one of the things we usually let Katie give like a little intro. It's potentially awkward for you to hear her do your bio from her perspective, but I think you can handle it, and you can make any corrections you feel like you need to when she's done. Okay. So I'm going to kick it to Katie. Yeah, here it is. This
is my introduction to Dr. Lori, and who is just internationally known just as Dr. Lori, which I think is an incredible way to say that she is an icon.
That's how you may know you made it.
Yeah, and the trauma-informed community by leading neuroscience-aligned best practices and applying them in real-world contexts. Dr. Lori is as genuine and as authentic as she seems. Honestly, that's one of the things. I think you are the most sincere person I've met. Always kind, caring, and supportive, just as she calls others to be. Dr. Lori is real deal because she practices what she preaches by spending her times regularly in classrooms, applying these practices. Dr. Lori walks alongside educators daily through professional development and hosting a cohort at Butler University. Dr. Lori leans into research, authoring, and co-authoring many books that have been staples in schools, especially through post-pandemic behavior. Dr. Lori, thank you for joining us today. I couldn't be more excited. Your work has inspired, created change, and given voice to many educators and children. This podcast is actually a product of Cohort 7's graduate project, and I have been waiting for this moment to say, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Lori.
Oh, my gosh, that is amazing. Thank you for having me.
She does a great job.
Amazing.
Not that Katie didn't, she was very comprehensive.
Yeah.
But is there anything, just real quick, handful of sentences, who you are, how, maybe even just a quick, how you got into this work?
Oh, Katie, you really just shared so much, and I am honored. Just to see this practicum project turn into a website and a podcast, and the children and youth and staff that you're serving, amazing. So no, I can't really think of anything. Let's just delve in.
Yeah.
A plus for Katie on that. Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna jump in and kind of get started. So first kind of question we have overall, can you just share a little bit about the applied educational neuroscience framework and how this is kind of shifting the practices in our schools?
Mm-hmm. So the framework is a framework in that it's not a program. It's not another initiative that we're adding to the plate. It is tier 1. So for educators, it is for all children, youth, and I'm going to add staff. This framework is about the adult nervous system as much as it is children and youth. It is trauma accommodating. I really like the word accommodating because it sits beside our children and youth and adults, bringing practices that address nervous system steadiness. And it also is a very equitable framework as we think about neurodivergent behaviors, neurodivergent learning, and just thinking about how we process and we learn and we assess and we live in such unique ways.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. I love the part about that it's as much for adult nervous systems as it is the children's. I think we find that to be the truth over and over and over again, right? Like consistently being in schools. It's really probably at times even more about the adult nervous system than it is even the nervous system of the kids. And that's tough. That makes it tough sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to say that is the biggest shift. I feel like when people wonder or ask us, like, how are you able to serve this level of kids at your building, or have this needs, or what was the big shift? And I honestly think it's spending a lot of time focusing on the adults, understanding their regulation state, having them be more mindful about that, understanding who each other, who each person is. That we spend a lot of time understanding each other as people. And then I think the other big shift about the pillars of A&E is just really that understanding of co-regulation, for people to understand that you have to be with kids and what co-regulation looks like. We've used that book. I'm sure you've seen it, The Rabbit Listens. What a beautiful model of co-regulation. We talk about that a lot. I've read that to the staff and shared it with parents. And for people to really understand what it looks like to sit beside somebody and really just being there is a good co-regulated model. And when it feels a little crazy, it's because a lot of dysregulated neurons around each other, right? So that idea of maintaining regulation is really critical. Yeah.
So one of the things we're going to do that kind of set up for this episode, we're going to go through some of the really just amazing practical resources that you've created, and we're really going to kind of go through them and have you talk about a little bit what your vision is for schools implementing them. And then Katie's also going to talk a little bit about how we've implemented some of them as well in like another, because your setting is also a real world setting, but like in another real world setting. And so I'm going to kind of let Katie take it away. She'll kind of go through them, and we'll go through one at a time.
Yeah, I think people are always looking for resources or things to anchor themselves to. And I think you've just produced so many high quality resources that are so practicable and affordable for schools and educators. So let's start with the easiest one, I think, is your Revelations Education website. Tons of resources on there. How can administrators or school professionals actually access that? What would you recommend?
Well, it is a ginormous website, and I apologize up front. I just keep throwing things in, not throwing things, but I just want everyone to have access. So it's revelationsineducation.com, and it really is a website to support and resource adults, youth, and children, whether you're an educator, a parent, a mental health professional, a clinician. I mean, we have intentionally created resources that not only support our children and youth, but really support adults and families, caregivers. So I think just taking a little piece of it at a time and enjoying some of the podcasts, enjoying some of the videos. It's connected to Edutopia. And in fact, right here, I'm writing an article right now for Edutopia. I'm very excited on Inside Out 2 on anxiety. And so there's a section called, I think it says free resources, or resources. And so just, have fun. I just say go play in the website, because I think 95% of the practices and templates and protocols we put in are free and downloadable.
Yeah, I was going to say that we've used the focus attention practices. There's a lot of resources on there for that. Those are quick. I think we get caught up a lot of times where we think, like, let's go do those go noodle breaks, and we have kids that are hyperarousal and hypoarousal, and the room seems crazier after we've done this like break thing. I would encourage people to dive into those resources, look at the focus attention practices. Those are very calm, research-based, brain-based things to maintain regulation and alertness in classrooms that are very simple and non-disruptive to the learning environment. And then the Edtopia articles, we've used a lot of them for professional development, quick, easy reads with really like great practical research. We just used one, I think last week, on the myths about restorative practices. We used your research article on that and really talked through restorative practices and went through some of the myths that you had in some scenarios set up. So if you're an administrator leading PD, great resource to use that as a structure. And I would say the focus attention practices are a great resource on your website if people are looking to like specifically hone in on something.
And also I want to add, I don't know if you've seen we have 120 new focused attention practice. They're like a deck of cards. So they're keyed. So they'll say, I'm kind of not liking the word calm these days. So it's S for steady and it's E for energizing, just depending on what the nervous system needs. Also, there are the 6 misunderstandings of discipline, which is great to share with school staff and communities, caregivers. So each shares a common statement from an adult nervous system that's dysregulated, and then we share the science underneath. So they're real short, and those would be good to share as well.
Yeah, all free on the website, which is
Yeah,
fabulous. So anybody can access those.
yeah.
The next one I'm really excited to talk about is 180 Days of Educational Neuroscience. Do you want to share a little bit about how you envision that being implemented in a school?
Oh, it was born out of 100 days of educational neuroscience that I wrote for the state of Indiana for our social and emotional competencies. So it was a part of our SEL state competencies before they were taken down a few years ago, like many SEL programs have been in some states. So I just didn't want it to disappear, and it has such potential. So we collaborated, and I had so much wonderful assistance in formatting it because it's a lot. So it says 180 days of educational neuroscience, but it literally could be 500 days of educational neuroscience. You could take day 1 and break it into a week. And that's really what I want teachers and administrators to understand is that, we created guiding questions, materials, a mini lesson, and then resources. That's how it's for each day. And then we've suggested 20 minutes to 30 minutes or 20 to 40 minutes. You could spend 5 or 10 minutes in one piece of day 1. So it's very important that these resources, Justin and Katie, are used consistently and predictably, because this is a warm-up, focused attention practices, 180 days. These bell work, for morning meeting, it really is a warm-up for our nervous systems. And that's how I've been looking at it. Like, you wouldn't go out and run 10 miles or 6 miles without stretching. You wouldn't do a vocal performance without warming up your voice. And yet when our kids walk in from so many experiences, to bring them into engagement and to help them to find some presence after a bus ride, breakfast, dysregulation at home or in another classroom, we don't do that. We just start learning. And it's not working well because it doesn't align with how our brains have developed. So when you think of morning meeting, bell work, focused attention practice, all of these resources, 180 days, it's all about our procedures, our exits, our transitions, how we start a class period, how we end a class period, whether it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever we have. We can't afford not to.
Yeah. Excuse me. I think what's been fun to watch coming into just a general education public school for me has been how well, and we're maybe a little spoiled, I know, at our specific building, but like how many of the teachers do such a great job of helping the students come in and have time to be able to regulate themselves, like you're saying, to be able to kind of steady themselves, right, for the day. I think a conversation I've had multiple times over the last couple of weeks, and actually Katie and I were just discussing this, sometimes we'll hear about students that come in, or, I'll have my own students that come in or whatever it may be, who come in and they look really happy, but they look like excessively happy, right? Like they're coming in, man, I'm so happy. I'm so excited. Or we have like activities set up for them that they're like, oh, they love doing that. They love like going to do this thing. And I think sometimes what can be hard to help the adults see is, hey, and I hand motion. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, sorry, one of my hands is in the air, I guess. How do you describe this? But it's so easy to go from like super excited and happy to super frustrated and annoyed or super
Mhm.
sad about something. Like, right, when you're already in the super side of things, it's so easy to cross over to that same side in other ways. And I think that some of these practices you're talking about, it's such an easy way to allow them to come in. And even if they are super happy, it helps them get back to a spot where they're like, I was just telling a student, it was just
Mhm.
yesterday, we got to get back to a spot where we're just regular happy, like a normal
Mhm.
amount of happy. And that's okay. Like, and being super happy is not bad, but you're not necessarily ready to go about the rest of your day if you're in this super feeling of anything. It's makes it that much tougher for you. But I think it's easy for the adults to feel like, oh, they look super happy, this should be a great day. And then sometimes what we'll hear is, then like all of a sudden there was like this big meltdown and we don't know why. And I'm like, well, they were already living in such an amped up,
Mhm.
dysregulated kind of state, even if it was happy. And it goes to that. So I love that idea of those starts that way to get us ready.
Yeah, and what you described is edginess.
Mm,
That's edgy. You can be edgy, happy, edgy, crossing over very quickly. And we see that with 18-month-old and 2 and 3-year-olds, where you
yes.
can be laughing. There are videos that have gone viral where there is the baby or the young child laughing, and then literally in the same third breath, there are tears. So there's a fine line
Yeah.
between that laughter and that crying. And so we use the language of the nervous system in our framework, and what you just described is edginess.
Mm,
Um, and that's that edgy super the edgy is, I think, synonymous with super.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like that. I'll start using that
Edgy.
edginess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to
Mhm.
say the 180 days of educational neuroscience, we have implemented that. We have a tier one SEL curriculum. We use Character Strong in our district. So we really were looking for something else that was really neuroscience aligned and intentional for our kids that we kind of specialize at our school housing. And we have adopted your 180 days of educational neuroscience and Justin and his counterparts program with the mental health therapist, and have had really good feedback from it. Just really the videos, accessibility, we ended up printing them so they're in the manual, but also have the online access. And so if you're looking to support even a unique niche group of students who really have high needs in that social, emotional, behavioral component, what an amazing program for them to really start understanding who they are in their bodies and brains. And you lay it all out. It's prep free, ready to go. So
Oh,
it's a
thank
great,
you.
great
That's
resource.
amazing.
Uh, your
Amazing.
your new book, your new baby, is the Brain Body Brilliance, which we also have. So you want to share a little bit about how you would envision a school taking this and maybe adopting it?
So, Body and Brain Brilliance is a manual, and it really brings connections over compliance, intentional neuroplasticity. It really takes the research, the application of the research, polyvagal theory research, and I'm smiling because it really is a culmination of the practices that I've been integrating in classrooms for the last 12 years. So when I began this course release at Marian University before I came to Butler, that was where I was observing teachers and just thinking, oh my gosh, Lori, you're not walking the walk. As a former special education teacher, former school counselor, at the university level in pre-service training and graduate work, I do not understand why we do not require professors to be in the K through 12 classroom consistently. And really any researcher, who is giving us research about children and adolescents. You have to be on the ground. I do. It just does not feel authentic. So the manual is really the culmination of the practices that I have been integrating over the last 12 years, and how some days are, really rough days. Some of the practices didn't go well. So we augmented them, we modified them, we met the students where they were. And then I began to really think about the adult nervous system a few years back. And that's the first pillar of the framework. And so this manual is very different than any manual out there because there is a centered focus on the adult nervous system. It is intended for staff to delve into before you even think about giving it to children and youth. We also have videos, modules that myself and my 4 collaborators created together, walking you through each chapter. Because I just think that's really important to know why we wrote it, what were the roadblocks, what were the challenges, what were the takeaways. We're really honest in those modules. It was really fun to record, and it really is, they're raw. I mean, it's just like the 3 of us sitting here. We're having this conversation. So I think it's futuristic. I think the manual is way ahead of its time. Not way ahead, but I think it's ahead. There hasn't been much out there as far as nervous system application for adolescents either. A lot of these SEL programs lean into elementary or younger children. They don't really address the adolescent nervous system. And we were very intentional about that in the adult nervous system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, because the adolescent, this is right at the second pruning that happens, and that they're the highest risk group for suicide at that age,
Yeah.
and really catching those kids at that middle school, secondary level is critical, and often get lost in the shuffle because they're no longer with one teacher. They're keep on moving around with all these adults. So where's the trusted adult? We've talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah.
I said I was jealous that this manual came out this year because when Justin and I started at our school and really starting to do some trauma-informed training, we kind of were writing it as we were going, and not always perfect and all those kind of things. And gosh, if you are a school administrator, this is what I want you to hear. I want you to buy this manual for your staff. There's modules in there. People say, well, I don't have the training you do, or I don't have the background knowledge or the confidence to come in and do that with my school. This manual is written. It goes through each chapter, its steps. It is a great book to do as a staff meeting, then break it back into a PLC group where your staff can have some authentic conversation. The video modules are in there. If you want to get your school on the right road, this manual is the book for school administrators to start thinking about rolling out next school year as you're planning your PD. Because this all has to happen first before any of the academic stuff can happen, right? So,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And here's a bonus that I thought about as we're bringing this, into the world. And a lot of times teachers will say, Lori, I don't have a neuroscience background, or administrators or social workers or counsel, I can't teach this and we heard that with the 180 days as well. Like, I don't feel qualified, or I don't feel comfortable teaching because I don't know this. And I wanted to shout this to the world, is that the kids love this. They love that you don't know. And it is an opportunity for a touch point. When we think about, Bruce Perry talks about those therapeutic dosings, therapeutic moments. This is one. This is a touch point. And that's what, when we are learning with our students, it gives us an opportunity to sit beside them and not in front of them. And our kids they love that they're asking questions where we will respond and say, you know what, I'm not sure. I don't know. Let's research. Let's Google it tonight, or let's come back and see what we can learn together tomorrow.
Yeah, as you're talking through that, I'm really involved with the Reggio Emilia study groups in our area for young children, have been for a long time. And one of the key principles of Reggio is being a learner alongside your students and really going into the classroom every day and figuring out what they want to learn about, and be like, I'm going to model how to research or answer questions I don't know. And that is powerful as we talk about those tier 1 practices in a vulnerable learning community. To start like that restorative practice framework.
Yeah. And I think just that idea of making any student of any age, right, feel like they're a part of, that you're a part of their team, and that the whole classroom is a part of a team, and you're all in it together, like you said, as opposed to, they're all a part of a team, and then you're the separate entity that's just in charge of them, and that's it. But
Exactly.
But that's such a relational part, and what an easy way, like you said, to build in one of those aspects of a room where you show that we're actually in this together, and I'm not somehow separate or apart from you,
Absolutely.
in every way. So yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. I would say probably one of your most iconic books is Connections Over Compliance. I know many, many people that have read that. And in that book, there are so many resources just within that text, which I thought was a wonderful surprise. Can you talk a little bit maybe how that one would maybe be rolled out or implemented? And I think still very relevant in schools
Mhm.
today.
So, they say that it takes 3 to 5 years for a book to really hit and I think Connections is, really hitting that precipice right now, which, is exciting to see. And, when we think about traditional discipline for so long, whether we are a leader of me school or strong character school or zone school, it really doesn't lean into our discipline protocols. They're just SEL practices. And that's another thing about the manual too, which was built and created and cultivated from Connections and Intentional. But Connections was really the first book that really looked at the science of, you know, just how we are social creatures and we're social organisms and we can't survive without each other. And when you think about school, how many of our children come in carrying in relational poverty. And when that is a part of their embodied experiences, they're unable to trust, they're unable to learn, they're unable to, to really thrive in any way. So it's interesting because when our children need us the most, we tend to send them away, whether it's tabbing them out, timing them out, grounding them, suspending them, expelling them, kicking them out, sending them to their room. And that's because I don't think many adults have questioned the way that we have been disciplined in our history of in our own families. And sometimes it's painful to go back and do that. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage to go back and think about how we were disciplined. And traditionally in the Western part of the world, we are reactionary and we focus on consequences that produce more fear-based behaviors. So I thought Connections Over Compliance would be thrown in the trash or it would be read. I was very nervous about this book coming out because it was edgy in its content. And thankfully, it's been embraced.
I
Yeah.
think one of the most iconic things that came out of it, it's become the connections over compliance has kind of been like the catchphrase that I think is really stuck with people. Are you asking for connection or are you asking for compliance? And I
Mhm.
think I've heard so many people bring that up when we've gone places. I think this book has been really well received for professional development in districts in terms
Mhm.
of I've seen and heard of book studies across the country that have happened over this one.
Yeah.
Great PLC book for buildings that want to have a
Mhm.
PLC group. Um, it's awesome just the way you've laid out all the framework and it's all the tools and resources and it's a great Audible read. I feel like
Mhm.
too if you're about like just pick up a book to read it, Audible is also a great avenue to access this book and I've listened to it a couple
Yeah.
times that way. So it's a great one for schools to implement.
Yeah, and we've talked
Uh,
a lot about how, in education and in a lot of things, but I think certainly in education as well, like we tend to let the pendulum swing too far one direction or the other at any given point in time, right? Like, so something's
mhm.
super important, then we're like, that's not important at all. It's the other thing, and we're not great about
Mhm.
falling in the middle too often. I think it's timely, right? Because
Mhm.
we've really fallen into a spot here over the last, I don't know how many years, but for the last little bit for sure, of how much we're supposed to get done in a classroom with students in the course of a
Mhm.
day. And because of that, inadvertently, a byproduct of that has been that teachers feel like they need compliance now. I
Yeah.
need compliance because that's what I'm being told. I've got to get all this stuff done. And the only way I can get all this stuff done is if I have compliance. And what gets
Mhm.
sacrificed 100% is relationships then. And not because any teacher is bad or awful or whatever else, but they also have this other pressure that's coming at them. And my hope really is that as we maybe start swinging back the other way, that again, we don't overcorrect, right? Like we find a healthy balance of what needs to get done to help educate kids, which is important, right? But then to also to land on that relational side much more than what we have. And I just think what a perfectly timed book over the last little bit to speak into that. So perfect, great. It's a good one.
Aw, thank you. Thank you so much.
The MTSS framework, we've gotten digital access for that. And I know the state of Ohio that we live in is called, you have to have an MTSS process. We were talking tiered frameworks. So I think a lot of people have some programs or whatever that pump out some interventions, but I think our kids that are chronically dysregulated with trauma-based backgrounds, these interventions, as Dr. Ross Green would say, the sticker charts don't work. So I think your MTSS framework is an awesome online digital resource you have a nice video that goes in there. Do you want to share a little bit about your vision for implementing that for districts?
So it's interesting. I took it into Kansas over the early fall or summer. I can't remember. I think it was September. And we've augmented the MTSS. So if you have seen it recently, I mean, it's been, just adapted, and I just don't want things to go stale, and to be out of touch. But I love it because it really takes the multi-tiers into the 4 areas: the academic area, which is the warm up, that's the focused attention practices. And then it really has a social and emotional section that's filled with resources that are touch points. It has articles, it has practices, templates. Then there's the community section that we've updated to, looking at, just how our communities can be places of felt safety, and how do we integrate that into our schools, because school's the de facto. And then on the 4th is looking at behavior. So we've actually linked Recast. We've actually linked so many of the resources that are helpful for peeling back layers of behavior, understanding what's happening in the nervous system, like Recast. Also making accommodations through an ACEs and neurodivergent lens, which we've upgraded that template as well, because you all know how long it takes to get an IEP going.
Yeah.
And I can't wait that long. So it doesn't replace, a BIP or FBA or IEP, but these are the templates that support grade levels and team meetings, PLC. It's just like when you sit down together and you can process, what's beneath the behavior, what accommodations can we make consistently across a grade level and predictably as our kids move from class to class. So it gets us out in front of a child's negative behavior. It helps to bring that engagement predictably into every classroom.
Yeah, and I would say the visual appearance of it, because I think sometimes we get these great resources and you're like, ugh, this looks really overwhelming. You have laid it out so it's so visually friendly to make it very user-friendly, to be a quick and easy tool. And I would encourage people that are starting to write 504s or put accommodations into special education programming that the resources that you provide, we have actually used as accommodations in some of those resources, because there are things like allowing a kid to put their hood up, right? And like things that we are putting out and suspending kids for, those are actually sensory accommodations we should be providing kids. And you speak a lot on that and list a lot of great accommodations within the framework. And I just encourage people to look into that. I know you have that on a couple different of your resources within Connections Over Compliance and some other places those resources are available at as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is the last one. I know you have Dr. Larry also has a lot of other resources and books. We're trying to hit the highlights of them. But I think the one that has made the most impact for me was the Applied Educational cohort. You're getting ready to launch cohort 10. What do you want educators to know about joining this cohort and what to expect?
Well, so this certification at Butler University in our College of Ed is really growing. It's very special. It carries, um, I just want to say it's a very therapeutic 11 months together. That's what I want to share. And of course, these are graduate hours. So, we do follow syllabi. We follow Butler's academic calendar. It's not just like getting a certificate from a 6 week or 9 week program. I mean, these are 9 graduate hours that are non-degreed. So they can, apply to a master's. They can cross universities if they need to. But the most important thing is that we really set up, and Katie, you know this because you sat beside me for 11 months.
Mhm.
We really form a family, and each cohort meets synchronously. We meet together, so it's just like being in person, really. Um, and we have a summer intensive that starts off in June, and that's the first 3 hour graduate course. And then we meet the fall semester. We follow Butler's academic calendar. And then we have a spring practicum, which this podcast and Katie and Brianna's website is this is their practicum, and they're continually growing it
Mhm.
and nurturing and adapting and augmenting and changing. So I hope that you'll all consider joining the next cohort because applications are open right now.
Yeah, I would say I've been through a lot of different training and certification programs over my career, and this is my absolute favorite, best thing I have done. It was like I can't wait to go to class tonight. Was the feeling
Mhm.
that I really needed to be at class tonight. Education's hard right now, and to be surrounded with such a group of people that are like-minded and the professional development, I have grown in so many ways joining the cohort, and the resources you give for availability, and Dr. Lori is accessible through the cohort. She teaches the classes, she's there, she answers your emails, she gives you feedback. So if you want to do something really good for yourself as an educator, I can't express how great it is to join the cohort and really grow yourself professionally big time. So all really good resources. I think if you're a school administrator, if you're a district leader, if you're a classroom teacher, there is something in here for everybody. I encourage somebody to pick one of these resources. They are so accessible in terms of cost and usability that you can get a trauma-informed school going or your classroom running in no time with a lot of these great resources as a starting point. So
Yeah.
they're all good, Dr. Lori, and you do it for everybody, and it's just amazing. So
Thank
So
you so much.
do you have time for a non sent to you ahead of time question?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Katie holds her breath. She never knows what I'm going to ask. So they're always fine. I don't know why it makes her nervous. So one of the topics I've kind of discussed with a lot of people, even really as recently as yesterday, is this balance between understanding the science of all of this,
Hmm.
which is important, and understanding like the practicality.
Hmm.
As schools kind of continue to train staff, can you just talk a little bit about how the balance between understanding the science and understanding the practicality works, or how you kind of work that balance out in your experience?
Well, it's a great question. And I'll just say that unless we deeply understand the why of a behavior, then anything that we're going to be implementing or integrating just does not feel valid, empowering. There's no positive emotional contagion with the students because if we're doing it in a way where we're not believing in it, then our kids are going to pick up on that. We're contagious as human beings, and so we're always picking up on each other, our emotions. And so I just feel like we have to understand. We want to understand why, because we live in this cognitive cortical world, right, where everything is word talk. And we lecture, we punish, we consequence, we are just talking, talking, talking. And when adults get upset, Katie's heard me say this, we talk louder and faster. And so, what's really interesting is that when we step back and just really reflect on what has been working well and what hasn't, that is buy-in right there. We ask schools to look at your discipline data. Because if you are not wanting to look at the science and reach beneath the behavior, look at your data. It holds a story. It tells the story of where you've been, where you are, and where you're heading. And our discipline data is powerful. And a trauma responsive school and district is only trauma responsive when you are addressing the gaps and the holes and the disproportionality inside your discipline data. That's a trauma responsive school.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so hard at times because, like Katie said, like you've said, that we've had these, these comments already, even during this conversation, right? Like where people feel like they're ill-equipped, right? They maybe feel like they're ill-equipped. And that's one of the things I love about just even the resources we went over. Like Katie said, there's more resources than that, but that this idea that like, well, I can't start, or I don't know. And I know I say this a lot on here, but people are sometimes very apprehensive to start and even begin because they don't know how it's going to end. And that sometimes stops us from beginning at all. Before we even came, I think before we came on, maybe it was after we came on, but you had been saying that you're constantly learning, right? We're all constantly learning. We're getting
Absolutely.
new. And if we waited until we were like, we know all the exact right things now, right this second, I know all of them and I know how it's all going to play out, we would never start. None of us would ever start doing anything.
No. And it's interesting today, I was in my 5th grade class right before I got on this podcast, a half hour before. And so if you hear the term sound bath, you're going to, a lot of people would think, ooh, metaphysical, woo woo, what is that? That shouldn't be in the schools. And what's interesting is that Butler is holding sound baths for our undergraduates and our faculty about once a month or every other week to buy. And there is growing research in the sound protocols that these sound baths provide. And so we've used it with our 5th grade. And I told Lori Boone, my co-teacher today, I said, okay, this is Friday. It's the Friday before. I mean, they have school next Monday and Tuesday. They're off Wednesday. But I said, it's, this is a lot. We've had a lot happen. So I said, as they worked on their hands, they did an activity. I said, we're going to turn on the sound bath for the second time. And it worked again. Like you can just see them it's just like seeing when you shake one of those crystal, or, not sparkle, one of my shakers, like a snow globe.
Globe, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like when you're shaking it and then you just see it all settle. Literally, that's how it felt again for the second time. I said, we're 2 for 2. So I think I know there's science, but I'm hesitant too. I really want to, when you hear me talk about sound baths, I want to back that up with science. And I was over the moon excited to see Butler, as a university integrating this, because they wouldn't unless, there was some strong literature that backed that up.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. I think consistently so hard. And I know you see this too, is people are, again, we've referenced, but teachers are so busy, staff are so busy, people have all these expectations. And sometimes as you start to describe stuff, you can watch at times, right? People can start to kind of glaze over as you get into the science of it. But if you can work, which is sometimes counterintuitive, but if you can kind of teach the science and the why behind alongside of the practicality, which again is, I think, so many of the things you have going, which is what's great, is they're learning both at the same time, and they're not getting so weighed down in just the science, but they're like, well, I don't know what to do with this. But they're also not just being given a lot of things to do, and they're like, well, I have no idea why this works. It's got to be both, and it can be both at the same time. And if you don't know how to do that, if you're out there and you're like, well, that sounds great, but I don't know how to do it. My gosh, how many resources did we just go over that can help that very thing? And I think that's such a key, is to be able to help people along with both things at once. It's a game changer, I think.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what you've got going. And I think that's really great. All right. So you wear a lot of different hats, author, professor, speaker, teacher, keep going. What's your favorite role to play? And then kind of what's up next for you? What do you got going?
Oh my gosh. I think there are two roles that I love the most, and I love everything I do. So, I mean, I love presenting to schools and districts around the world, but being with students in the classroom is just like, I look forward to those 2 afternoons, every week. And some afternoons are just hard. I mean, I just come home and I just think, oh my God. And I think the other thing is this Butler certification, to watch the growth and the excitement, the passion, and just seeing how we started with 6, 9 years ago, and just to see it move into the world of administrators, OTs, physical therapists, social workers, counselors, pediatricians, it's mental health there are just speech and language pathologists. I mean, it's just amazing. So I love that. I just feel so fortunate. I think what's next is I really want to now, the manual came out really fast, right after Intentional Neuroplasticity, that book, that text that Dr. Poor just wrote the foreword to, and it's really built in polyvagal. So I think I just want to take some time now and begin to use some practices to integrate the manual, the 180 days, and just, continue to grow the certification for right now.
Yeah. So not run 100 miles an hour for forever.
Yeah.
That's
I
how,
don't know.
that's how your stretches. That's how some of your stretches sound to me.
Yeah. I was telling you before we started recording. I mean, I always think I'm busy, but somehow Dr. Lori does it all and still has time to be intentional about spending time with her family and her grandchildren and her husband, and has this authentic time with them and is super present. And so that's amazing to me that you maintain all that and are so calm and genuine at the same time. So.
Well, as we wrap up, we usually end, we ask, we kind of all of us say, what's one thing you'd want people to walk away from this episode knowing? So we'll give you a minute. You don't have to answer first. I'll make Katie answer first, then I'll answer second, then you can answer last. So
Okay.
be thinking. I mean, I know you're going to be listening to Katie, but be thinking, what's one thing you'd like people to walk away remembering from this podcast? Katie, where are you?
I would just say there is a ton of free and very accessible materials out there. So I'm not an expert, I don't know where to start, be an excuse to not really dive into what our kids need right now. We are the advocates. We are the safe place. We are going to make the shift in the distance for our kids culturally. The next generation is with us. And so we have all the tools and resources right here. We went over a lot of them. And I encourage you to pick up one and dive into it and start trying some things out. And I know Dr. Lori is always accessible. Justin, I always say, reach out to us. We will help support, coach you through it. But we've kids out there depending on us. So pick up a resource and get started.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of the same idea. We were resource heavy and kind of talked about that this episode, which is great. I think that's what people ask for a lot. What are resources? Obviously, Dr. Lori, you've got a ton. There are other people out there that have stuff going as well that we've gone over in previous episodes. And there's a lot of stuff that we haven't gone over in any of our episodes that's out there. I think it's always a good place to start with people that have been doing the work for a while and that have stuck with the work, that aren't just trying to kind of be a flash in the pan. So look for those people like the Dr. Loris of the world, right? Who have been around and are doing it and are wanting to stay authentic with it. Like she said, staying in tune with what it's really like to be in a classroom and in a school. I think that's wildly important and holds a lot of weight. So Start with those people that you know. Second thing I would say is you should probably go look up what a sound bath is.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to look into it. I'm very
you don't
interested
know?
at this point.
Oh, we're gonna YouTube this later. He's
and
gonna have
so
to do it.
seems like something I could get into real quick. And so I'm gonna check it out for sure.
Yeah. And there's science in the decibels. Dr. Porges has a sound and safe protocol, which is, listening to sound that is intentional in its, auditory alignment with limbic structures in the brain. So
super interesting.
Yeah. And I've just seen it. It's just like, wow. And it's, to go to bed to that is nice too, just to end a day for adults. There's just lots of ways to transition. I think, my takeaway or what I want to give to your audience today is that there's a quote that I've shared in all my presentations for so long, and it's that there is not a person in this world that does not feel a bit better when they have been seen and heard and felt.
That's good.
And
that's so good.
Yeah, when you think of all the resources, really, it's our emotional available presence that really begin to help that child, adolescent, or a colleague to be seen and heard and seen with a purpose.
Yeah, I really love that. There's nothing else to add. Being seen is such an important part of being a human, and that's amazing. I love that quote. Well, Dr. Lori, thank you so much for coming on. Episode 50. So exciting,
Thank you
right?
so much. Yeah. Okay, I have to take a screenshot of us really quick. Okay,
yeah.
I'm posting this. This is just
Go ahead.
so fun. All right, ready?
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay, that is so I bet. Okay. All right, ready? Okay, got it.
You got it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. If you guys are out there and you've listened to this episode, you think it's going to be useful to somebody, you think it's going to be something that people could utilize these resources. Maybe you're a staff member, you want to send it on to an administrator. Maybe you're an administrator, you want to start plugging it in with your staff. Any number of things, share it, like it, always giving a review is helpful. It helps keep the conversation going and helps other people access the conversation, which is really what we're all about. Katie, I'll let you take us out.
Yeah, I was going to say cohort 10 applications are open now. You will not regret it. It'll be the best professional experience. So get connected. Yep. Thanks, Dr. Lori.
Yeah.
We'll go out and do the work.
Yeah, let's go do the work.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I've so enjoyed our time.
Hey, everybody, let's keep the conversation going.
Like and subscribe below and keep the comments rolling.